Good afternoon. Happy Friday, everybody. GIF. We're back again with some more Quarantine Story Hour, this time continuing as we have been with War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. This translation I'm reading from is a newer translation by Richard Pevear and Larissa Volokhonsky. If you haven't tuned in before, thanks for joining. If you have, thanks for coming back. To pick up any of the things you've missed, there's a War and Peace playlist on my channel with all the readings so far. It's getting a little complicated to sum up everything up, but there's a lot of intrigues, a lot of different people involved. Pierre, who is a bastard son of a count, who seems like he may have gotten his inheritance. And there's Prince Andrei and his pregnant wife and his sister, and a whole host of other people involved now in all the intrigues happening between Petersburg and Moscow and Prince Andrei's father's house, Bald Hills, which is in the country. Today's reading will be a little bit shorter. Sorry, yesterday's was really long. Got a little carried away, didn't realize how long it was. Today's is going to be shorter. I have a lot of other things I actually have to jump around and do today. So, and you'll also see we're coming to a milestone. So let's just go ahead and jump in. I'll put the link for the playlist at the end of this video. There's a lot of different languages involved here. So there's Russian names, there's some French. Some of the French I will read if it's like a few words or sentences, but for longer sections, there's translations in English. So I'll just cue you that I'm jumping down to those English. And so if you're ever curious about wanting, maybe you speak French, or because sometimes there's nuances that are lost in translation, you're welcome to pick up a copy and look for the original French, or pick up a copy and translate some of the French to English, or vice versa. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. We are on Volume 1, Part 1, Section 24 today, and we'll do 24 and 25. At the appointed hour, powdered and clean-shaven, the prince came out to the dining room, where he was awaited by his daughter-in-law, Princess Maria, Mademoiselle Bourienne, and the prince's architect, who by the prince's strange caprice was admitted to the table, though by his insignificant position the man could in no way count on such an honor. The prince, who in his life kept firmly to social distinctions and rarely admitted even important provincial officers to the table, suddenly decided to demonstrate by means of the architect Mikhail Ivanovich, who used to blow his nose in the corner on a checkered handkerchief, that all men are equal, and more than once impressed it upon his daughter that Mikhail Ivanovich was no worse than you or I. At table, the prince most often addressed himself to the wordless Mikhail Ivanovich. In the dining room, immensely high like all the rooms in the house, the prince's entrance was awaited by the domestics and servants standing behind each chair. The butler, a napkin over his arm, examined the place settings, winking to the latchkeys and constantly shifting his anxious gaze from the wall clock to the door from which the prince was to appear. Prince Andrei was looking at a huge gilded frame, new to him, with a picture of the family tree of the Princes Volokhonsky, which hung across the room from an equally large frame, with a poorly painted portrait, obviously from the hand of a household artist, of a sovereign prince in a crown, who was supposed to be a descendant of Rurik and the first ancestor of the Volokhonsky family. Prince Andrei looked at this genealogical tree, shaking his head and chuckling with an air of someone looking at a portrait that is a ridiculously good likeness. "That's him all over," he said to Princess Maria, who came up to him. Princess Maria looked at her brother in surprise. She did not understand what made him smile. Everything her father did evoked an awe in her which was not subject to discussion. "Every man has his Achilles heel," Prince Andrei went on, "with his enormous intelligence, donneur d'un sacré ridicule." Princess Maria could not understand her brother's bold opinions and was getting ready to object to him when the awaited footsteps were heard from the study. The prince came in quickly, gaily, as he always did, as if deliberately contrasting his hasty movements to the strict order of the house. At the same moment, the big clock struck 2, and another in the drawing-room responded in a high voice. The prince stopped. From under his thick, beetling brows, his lively, bright, stern eyes looked around at everyone and rested on the young princess. The young princess experienced at that moment the feeling courtiers experience at the appearance of a Tsar, that feeling of fear and respect which this old man evoked in all those around him. He stroked the princess's head, and then, with an awkward gesture, patted her on the back of the neck. Delighted, delighted, he said, and looked at her intently in the eye once again, quickly stepped away and sat down in his place. Sit down, Mikhail Ivanovich, sit down. He pointed his daughter-in-law to the place next to him. A servant pulled out the chair for her. Ho, ho, said the old man, looking at her rounded waist. Rushing things, that's not good. He laughed dryly, coldly, unpleasantly, as he always laughed, only with his mouth, not with his eyes. You must walk as much as possible, he said. The little princess either did not hear or did not want to hear his words. She was silent and seemed embarrassed. The prince asked about her father, and the princess began to speak and smiled. He asked her about mutual acquaintances. The princess became still more animated and started talking away, giving the prince greetings and town gossip. La comtesse approxime le pauvre a perdu son mari et elle est plus les rames de la rue, she said, becoming more and more animated. As her animation increased, the prince looked at her more and more sternly, and suddenly, as if he had studied her enough, arrived at a clear idea of her, and turned away and addressed Mikhail Ivanovich. Well now, Mikhail Ivanovich, things are going badly for our friend Bonaparte. Prince Andrei, he always referred to his son in the third person like this, has just been telling me what forces are being prepared against him, but you and I are always considered him an empty man. Mikhail Ivanovich, who had no idea when this you and I had spoken such words about Bonaparte, but who understood that he was needed in order to launch into their favorite subject, looked at the young prince in surprise, not knowing what would come of it. We have a great statistician here, the prince said to his son, pointing to the architect. And the conversation again turned to war, to Bonaparte and today's generals and statesmen. The old prince seemed to be convinced not only that all present-day men of action were mere boys, who did not even understand the ABCs of military and state affairs, and that Bonaparte was a worthless little Frenchman who was successful only because there were no Potemkins and Suvorovs to oppose him, but he was also convinced that there were no political difficulties in Europe, nor was there a war, but only some sort of marionette comedy that today's people played at, pretending they meant business. Prince Andrei cheerfully endured his father's mockery of the new people, and provoked his father to talk and listen to him with obvious delight. All that there was before seems good, he said, but wasn't it that same Suvorovs who fell into the trap set for him by Moreau and was unable to get out of it? Who told you that? Who told you? Cried the prince. Suvorov, and he flung away his plate, which was deftly caught by Tikhon. Suvorov! Think a little, Prince Andrei. 2 men, Friedrich and Suvorov. Moreau could have been captured if Suvorov had had a free hand, but he had had the Hofkriegswurst Schnapsrath on his hands. Even the devil wouldn't be half glad of that, but go, you'll learn about those Hofkriegswurst Schnapsraths. Suvorov couldn't get on with them. How is Mikhail Kutuzov going to do it? No, my friend, he went on, you and your generals won't get around Bonaparte. You need to get a hold of a Frenchman so that their own don't know their own, and their own beat their own. They sent the General Pachen to New York, to America, to fetch the madman Moreau, he said, alluding to the invitation made to Moreau that year to enter the Russian service. Wonders! What were the Potemkins, the Suvorovs, the Orlovs? Germans? No, brothers, either you're all lost your wits there, or mine have burnt out. God help you, but we'll see. Take Bonaparte for a great general. I'm by no means saying that all plans are good, said Prince Andrei. Only I can't understand how you can make such a judgment about Bonaparte. Laugh all you like, but Bonaparte is still a great general. Mikhail Ivanovich, the old prince cried to the architect, who, being busy with the roast, had hoped to be forgotten. Didn't I tell you Bonaparte was a great tactician? Well, he says so too. Sure thing, Your Excellency, replied the architect. The prince laughed again, his cold laugh. Bonaparte was born lucky. He has excellent soldiers, and the Germans were the first he attacked. You'd have to be a do-nothing not to beat the Germans. Ever since the world began, everyone's beaten the Germans, and they've beaten nobody, except each other. It was on them he earned his glory. And the prince began to analyze all the mistakes which, To his way of thinking, Bonaparte had made in all his wars and even in state affairs. His son did not object, but it was clear that, whatever the arguments presented to him, he was as little able to change his opinion as the old prince was. Prince Andrei listened, holding back his objections, and involuntarily amazed at how this old man, who had sat alone in the country uninterruptedly for so many years, could know and discuss in such detail and with such subtlety all the military and political circumstances of Europe in recent years. You think I'm an old man and don't understand the real state of affairs, he concluded. But I have it all up here. I don't sleep nights. So where has this great general of yours shown himself? That would be a long story, said his son. Off with you to your Bonaparte, then. Mademoiselle Bourienne, voilà encore une admirature de votre goujat d'empereur, he shouted in excellent French. Vous savez que je ne suis pas bonapartiste, mon prince. Dieu sait quand reviendra, the prince sang off-key, laughed still more off-key, and left the table. All through the argument and the rest of dinner, the little princess was silent and kept glancing fearfully now at Princess Maria, now at her father-in-law. When they left the table, she took her sister-in-law by the arm and led her to another room. Comme c'est un homme d'esprit, votre Pierre, she said. C'est à cause de cela peut-être qu'il me fait peur. Ah, he's so kind, said the princess. Section 25. Prince Andrei was leaving the next evening. The old prince, not abandoning his order, went to his rooms after dinner. The little princess was with her sister-in-law. Prince Andrei, dressed in a traveling frock coat without epaulettes, was packing with his valet in the rooms assigned to him. He personally saw to the carriage and the loading of the trunks and ordered the horses harnessed up. All that remained in the room were the objects Prince Andrei always carried with him: a strong box, a big silver cellaret, two Turkish pistols, and a saber, a present from his father, brought back from Ochakov. All of these traveling accessories Prince Andrei kept in great order. Everything was new, clean, in broad cloth covers, carefully tied with tapes. At the moment of departure and a change of life, people capable of reflecting on their actions usually get into a serious state of mind. At these moments, they usually take stock of the past and make plans for the future. Prince Andrei's face was very thoughtful and tender. His hands behind his back, he paced rapidly up and down the room, looking straight ahead and thoughtfully shaking his head. Was he afraid of going to war? Was he sad to be leaving his wife? Perhaps both, but evidently not wishing to be seen in such a state. When he heard footsteps in the hallway, he quickly unclasped his hands, stopped by the table, pretending to tie the tapes on the strong box cover, and assumed his usual calm and impenetrable expression. They were the heavy footsteps of Princess Maria. They told me you gave orders to harness up, she said breathlessly. She had obviously come running. And I wanted so much to talk more with you, alone. God knows how long we're parting again. You're not angry that I've come. You've changed very much, Andrushka, she added, as if to explain her question. She smiled as she pronounced the name, Andrushka. It must have been strange to her to think that this stern, handsome man was the same Andrushka, a thin, frolicsome boy, her childhood companion. And where is Lise? He asked, only smiling in answer to her question. She was so tired that she fell asleep in my room on the sofa. Ah, André, quel trousseau de femme vous avez, she said, sitting down on the sofa opposite her brother. She's a perfect child, such a dear, merry child. I've come to love her so. Prince Andrei was silent, but the princess noticed the ironic and scornful expression that appeared on his face. But one must be indulgent towards little weaknesses. Who doesn't have them, Andrei? Don't forget that she grew up and was formed in society, and then her position now isn't very rosy. One must enter into each person's position. Tout comprendre, c'est tout pardonner. Just think how it is for the poor dear in her condition, after the life she's used to part from her husband and remain alone in the country. It's very hard. Prince Andrei smiled, looking at his sister, as we smile listening to people whom we think we can see through. You live in the country and you don't find this life so terrible, he said. I'm another matter. Why talk of me? I do not and cannot wish for any other life, because I don't know any other life. But think, Andrei, for a young and worldly woman in the best years of her life to be buried in the country alone because Papa's always busy and I, you know me, how poor I am and resources, for a woman accustomed to the best society. Mademoiselle Bourienne alone. I dislike her very much, your Bourienne, said Prince Andrei. Oh no, she's very dear and kind, and above all, a pitiful girl. She has nobody. To tell the truth, she's not only unnecessary to me, she's even an inconvenience. You know, I've always been a wild creature, and now more than ever. I like being alone. Mon Pierre likes her very much. She and Mikhail Ivanovitch are the two persons with whom he's always gentle and kind, because he's their benefactor. As Stern says, we love people not so much for the good they've done us as for the good we've done them. Mon Pierre took her as an orphan, sur le pave, and she's very kind. And Mon Père likes her way of reading. She reads aloud to him in the evenings. She reads beautifully. Well, but in truth, Marie, I wonder if father's character isn't sometimes hard on you, Prince Andrei asked suddenly. Prince Maria was first surprised, then frightened by the question. On me? Hard on me, she said. He's always been tough, but now I think he's becoming difficult, said Prince Andrei, probably speaking so lightly of their father on purpose to puzzle or test his sister. You're very good in every way, Andrei, but you have a sort of mental pride, the princess said, following her own train of thought, more than the course of the conversation, and that is a great sin. Is it possible to judge one's father? And even if it were possible, what other feelings than veneration can a man like Mon Père evoke? I'm so content and happy with him. I only wish everyone could be as happy as I am. Her brother shook his head mistrustfully. That's one thing that's hard for me. To tell you the truth, Andrei, is father's way of thinking in the religious respect. I don't understand how a man with such an enormous intellect cannot see what is clear as day and can be so deluded. That constitutes my one unhappiness. But here, too, I've seen a shade of improvement recently. His mockery recently hasn't been so biting, and there's a monk whom he received and with whom he spoke for a long time. Well, my friend, I'm afraid you and this monk are wasting your power, Prince Andrei said mockingly but affectionately. Ah, mon ami, I only pray to God and hope he will hear me. Andrei, she said timidly after a moment's silence, I have a big request to make of you. What is it, my friend? No, promise me you won't refuse. It won't be any trouble for you, and there won't be anything in it that's unworthy of you. Only you'll comfort me. Promise, Andrushka, she said, putting her hand into her reticule and taking hold of something in it, but not showing it yet, as if what she was holding constituted the object of her request, and before she got his promise to fulfill her request, she could not take this something out of her reticule. She looked at her brother with a timid, pleading gaze. Even if it was a great deal of trouble for me, Prince Andrei said, as if guessing what it was about. You can think what you like. I know you're the same as Mon Pierre. Think what you like, but do it for me. Do it, please. Father's father, our grandfather, wore it through all the wars. She still would not take out what she was holding out of her reticule. So promise me? Of course. What is it? Andrei, I'm going to bless you with an icon, and you promise me never to take it off. Do you promise? Of course. If it doesn't weigh 100 pounds and pull my neck down. To give you pleasure, said Prince Andrei. But that same second, noticing the distressed look that came to his sister's face at this joke, he instantly repented. I'm very glad, truly very glad, my friend, he added. Against your will he will save you and have mercy on you and turn you to him, because in him alone there is trust and peace, she said in a voice trembling from emotion, with a solemn gesture, holding up in both hands before her brother an old oval icon of the Savior with a blackened face in a silver setting on a finely wrought silver chain. She crossed herself, kissed the icon, and gave it to Andrei. Please, Andrei, for me. From her big eyes shone rays of a kindly and timid light. These eyes lit up her whole, thin, sickly face and made it beautiful. Prince Andrei wanted to take the icon, but she stopped him. Andrei understood, made a sign of a cross, and kissed the icon. His face was at the same time tender, he was touched, and mocking. Merci, mon ami. She kissed him on the forehead and sat down again on the sofa. They were silent. So I was saying to you, Andrei, be kind and magnanimous, as you've always been. Don't judge Lise too severely, she began. She's so dear, so kind, and her position is very hard now. I don't believe I've said anything to you, Masha, about reproaching my wife for anything or being displeased with her. Why are you saying all this to me? Prince Maria broke into red blotches and said nothing, as if she felt guilty. I haven't said anything to you, but it has already been said to you, and that makes me sad. The red blotches stood out still more on Princess Maria's forehead, neck, and cheeks. She wanted to say something, but could not bring it out. Her brother had guessed right. The little princess had wept after dinner, had said she had a foreboding of a bad delivery, was afraid of it, and had complained about her life, her father-in-law, and her husband. After her tears, she had fallen asleep. Prince Andrei felt sorry for his sister. Know one thing, Masha, I cannot, have not, and never will reproach my wife for anything, nor can I reproach myself for anything in relation to her, and that will always be so, whatever circumstances I find myself in. But if you want to know the truth, if you want to know whether I'm happy, no. Is she happy? No. Why is that? I don't know. As he was saying this, he got up and went over to his sister, and bending down, kissed her on the forehead. His fine eyes shone with an intelligent and kindly, unhabitual light, but he was looking not at his sister, but into the darkness of the open doorway over her head. Let's go to her. I must say goodbye. Or you go alone, wake her up, and I'll come presently, Petrushka. Petrushka, he called to his valet, come here, take these things out. This goes under the seat, this to the right-hand side. Princess Maria got up and went to the door. She paused. André, si vous avez la foi, vous serez André's adieu. Pour qu'elle vous donne l'amour que vous ne sentez pas, et votre prière aurait été exaucée. Yes, there's always that, said Prince Andrei. Go, Masha, I'll come presently. On the way to his sister's room, in the gallery that connected one house to the other, Prince Andrei met the sweetly smiling Mademoiselle Bourrienne, who 3 times that day had already run into him with her rapturous and naive smile in secluded passages. Ah, je vous croyais chez vous, she said, blushing and lowering her eyes for some reason. Prince Andrei looked at her sternly. A spiteful look suddenly came to Prince Andrei's face. He said nothing to her, but avoiding her eyes, looked at her forehead and hair with such scorn that the Frenchwoman blushed and left without saying anything. When he approached his sister's room, the princess was already awake, and her merry little voice could be heard through the open door, hurriedly sending out one word after another. She was talking as if, after a long absence, she wanted to make up for lost time. Non, mais figurez-vous la vieille comtesse Zuboff avec des fausses boucles et les bouches pleines de fausses dents comme elle laissait le verre. Défier le anis. Ha ha ha, Marie. 5 times already, with other people, Prince Andrei had heard exactly the same phrases about the Countess Zubov and the same laughter from his wife. He quietly went into the room. The princess, round, rosy, with her work in her hands, was sitting in an armchair and talking non-stop, telling over her Petersburg memories and even phrases. Prince Andrei went to her, stroked her head, and asked whether she had rested from the journey. She made a reply and went on with the small talk. The coach and 6 was standing at the porch. Outside it was a dark autumn night. The coachmen could not see the shafts of the carriage. On the porch, people with lanterns bustled about. Light shone through the big windows of the immense house. The domestic servants crowded in the front hall, wishing to say goodbye to the young prince. In the reception room stood the whole household, Mikhail Ivanovich, Mademoiselle Bourrienne, Prince Maria, and the little princess. Prince Andrei had been summoned to his father's study, where the old prince wanted to say goodbye to him, man to man. Everyone was waiting for them to emerge. When Prince Andrei went into the study, the old prince, in his old man's spectacles and his white smock, in which he received no one except his son, was sitting at the table and writing. He looked up. You're leaving? He said, writing again. I've come to say goodbye. Kiss me here. He pointed to his cheek. Thank you, thank you. What are you thanking me for? For not overstaying and clinging to a woman's skirt. Service before all. Thank you, thank you. He went on writing, so that the spatters flew from his scratching pen. If you want to say something, speak. I can do the 2 things at once, he added. About my wife. I'm so ashamed to be leaving her on your hands. What's this drivel? Say what you want. When it's time for my wife to give birth, send to Moscow for an accoucheur so that he'll be here. The old prince stopped and, as if unable to understand, stared with stern eyes at his son. I know no one can help if nature doesn't help, Prince Andrei said, visibly embarrassed. I agree that only 1 case in a million ends badly, but it's her and my fantasy. People have said things to her. She's had dreams, and she's afraid. The old prince said to himself, still writing. I'll do it. He signed with a flourish, suddenly turned quickly to his son and laughed. A bad business, eh? What is it, Papa? A wife, the old princess said curtly and significantly. I don't understand, said Prince Andrei. Nothing to be done, my friend, said the prince. They're all like that. No use unmarrying. Don't be afraid. I won't tell anybody, but you know it yourself. He seized his hand in his bony little fist, shook it, looked straight into his son's face with his quick eyes that seemed to see through a person, and again laughed in his cold laugh. The son sighed, admitting by this sigh that his father had understood him. The old man continued to fold and seal letters with his habitual dexterity, kept snatching up and throwing down wax, seal, and paper. What can you do? She's beautiful. I'll do everything. You can rest easy, he said brusquely while sealing a letter. Andre said nothing. He was both pleased and displeased that his father understood him. The old man got up and handed the letter to his son. Listen, he said, don't worry about your wife. Whatever can be done will be done. Now listen, give this letter to Mikhail Ilaronovich. I write that he should use you in good posts and not keep you long as an adjunct. Nasty duty. Tell him I remember him and love him, and write and tell me how he receives you. If he's all right, serve him. Nikolai Andreevich Volokhonsky's son won't serve anyone on charity. Well, now, come here. He spoke so quickly that half of the words remained unfinished, but his son was used to understanding him. He led his son to the desk, opened the lid, pulled out a drawer, and took from it a notebook filled with his bold, tall, compact handwriting. I'm sure to die before you. Know that these are my journals, to be given to the sovereign after my death. Now here is a Lombard note and a letter. It's a prize for whoever writes the history of Suvorov's campaigns, to be sent to the academy. Here are my jottings. Read them for yourself. When I'm gone, you'll find useful things. Andre did not tell his father that he would probably live for a long time yet. He understood that there were no need to say it. I'll do it all, father, he said. Well, and now goodbye. He gave his son his hand to kiss and embraced him. Remember one thing, Prince Andre. If you are killed, I, your old father, will be pained. He unexpectedly fell silent and suddenly went on in a shrill voice. But if I've learned that you have not behaved like Nikolai Volokhonsky's son, I'll be ashamed, he shrieked. That you might not have told me, father, the son said, smiling. The old man fell silent. I also wanted to ask you, Prince Andre continued, if I'm killed, and if I should have a son, don't let him leave you, as I told you yesterday. He should grow up here with you, please. Not give him to your wife, the old man said and laughed. They stood silently facing each other. The old man's quick eyes were aimed straight into his son's eyes. Something twitched in the lower part of the old man's face. We've said our goodbyes. Off with you, he said suddenly. Off with you, he shouted in a loud and angry voice, opening the door of the study. What is it? What's wrong? Asked both princesses, seeing Prince Andre and the momentarily emerging figure of the old man in a white smock, wigless, and an old man's spectacles, shouting in an angry voice. Prince Andre sighed and said nothing. Well, he said, turning to his wife, and this well sounded like cold mockery, as if he had said, now perform your tricks. Andre, déjà, the princess said, turning pale and looking at her husband in fear. He embraced her. She cried out and fell unconscious on his shoulder. He cautiously withdrew the shoulder she was lying on, looked into her face, then carefully seated her in an armchair. Adieu, Marie, he said softly to his sister. They kissed each other's hands, and with quick steps he walked out of the room. The princess lay in the armchair, and when Mademoiselle Bourrienne rubbed her temples, Princess Maria, supporting her sister-in-law, went on looking with her beautiful, tear-filled eyes at the door through which Prince Andre had gone, and making the sign of the cross at him. From the study, like gunshots, came the oft-repeated angry sounds of the old man blowing his nose. As soon as Prince Andre left, the door to the study quickly opened. The old man's stern figure appeared in its white smock. Gone? Well, that's good, he said, gave the unconscious little princess an angry look, shook his head reproachfully, and slammed the door. And that is the end of part 1. So, actually, that wasn't that much shorter than I thought it was going to be. So, interesting. So, Andre's off to war, and the rest of the family's in the country. It's always interesting to see how people respond to, like, sad goodbyes and that sort of thing. But so that's the end of part 1. So, if you're keeping track, we're still in volume 1, but tomorrow we'll start. Oh, no, not tomorrow, because it's Friday. Sorry. Monday we'll start part 2, and that part 2, it's section 1 again. So if you're keeping track, you'll see how I have it notated in the title of the video and in the description. Yeah. So that's the end of volume 1, part 1. Thank you all very much. And I hope you have a great weekend. Stay healthy and safe. And if you need to catch up or want to review anything, remember I have that playlist, and I'll drop the link to the full War and Peace playlist in my description for this video. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend.